The lady from Dakota, Representative Maye Quade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to tell you about the two most important men in my life, my father and my father-in-law. They were both born in December of 1949. They were both U of M graduates. They both had beautiful daughters who fell in love with each other. And for a long time, I thought that was where the similarities ended. My father-in-law owns a farm in rural Minnesota and is a farmer and truck driver. My father is a poli-sci major who works in HR. And I know my father, as a black man, participated in the protests in the 60s, and I know the long and rich history of that. His family's from Alabama. When he was 6 years old, he wanted to drink out of a drinking fountain, and he got slapped across the head by his grandfather, said, no, not that one. And so you can bet, in the 60s, that's where my father went back to help out his own family members for the right to vote and exist in their own town. But this past weekend, I was with my father-in-law, teaching me how to target shoot. And I was looking at his tractors, and he said, well, you know, I drove that tractor up to where you work now. I drove that tractor up there. And I said, what? And he said, yes, the tractor Cades of 1985, before I was even born. When prices were so low and people were being forced out of their own farms, the banks and the insurance companies would foreclose on a day, and you had to be out of your farm that day. Families, out of their own homes, nowhere to go. So the farmers wanted support in the pricing, and they weren't getting it. They weren't being heard, and so they decided to drive their tractors on the freeway to the Capitol. My father-in-law was the lead tractor because he had the slowest tractor, and they didn't want to leave him behind, so he was the lead tractor. And he drove it all the way up to the Capitol, and I said, wow, when was this? January in Minnesota in 1985 at 15 miles an hour. He drove his tractor to the Capitol. The injustice was real. And I said, so how did it turn out? What happened? And he said, well, one guy left his tractor parked on the Capitol grounds. It was being foreclosed on. They were going to repossess it, so he just left it there. Figured they'd have a better time getting it from the Capitol. But the legislature did respond. They didn't get the price supporting they wanted, but at least they put in a rule that said you had about a year or two to work with the bank. You weren't thrown out of your house right away. And I said, well, what would have happened if their response was to make driving tractors on the road more illegal? And he said, why would they do that? I said, why indeed? Members, the American response to injustice is civil disobedience. It always has been. And I tell you this story about my father-in-law because I think that this vote is about who's protesting now, and it's not. It's not, and it never will be. There are people who have protested in the past about things we may or may not agree with, and there's going to be people who protest in the future about things we might not even know about right now. We took an oath to be in this body, to uphold our Constitution. Democracy requires discipline for those who participate in it. This is not discipline. This is not even a response to the reason why people were on the roads. Representative Zerwas, you had the opportunity to hear your constituents' call. You are uniquely positioned to answer the call of people who are protesting on the roads. We have that power in this room. We should not be using our power to crack down on dissent. A responsive government does not need to crack down on dissenters. A responsive government responds to why someone might feel the need to protest in the street. So members, I ask you today to vote green for the Becker-Fenn Amendment because this is what we need to do to uphold the oath that we all promised to take. Thank you.
The lady from Washington.